Thank you. Bulavinaka, everyone. I'm Padmini Gander from Cluster 13. It is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, whose journey and dedication inspire both professionally and deep cultural values. Gafa hails proudly from Samoa, and she's the first generation New Zealand born Samoan. Professionally, Gafa works as a SENCo, and she is a committed member of the Pasifika Autism Support Group. She has presented and facilitated numerous talanua on neurodiversity in education. We are truly honored to have Gafa Maiava with us today. We look forward to hearing the rich lived experiences you bring, Gafa, and the insights that will deepen our understanding and enrich our practice. Please join me in welcoming Gafa Maiava.
Morning, everyone, or afternoon now. It's a real privilege and a blessing to be here today. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Puketapapa te maunga, ko moana nui a kiwa te moana. Ko Satnapu rawa, ko Puipa oku iwi, ko Poutoa te marae, no Hamoa ahau. Kei one whiro hikurangi toku kāinga inaine, ko St. Leonard's Road School Te Kura, ko Tungamala Maiava toku whānau, ko Pauli Samuelu Maiava taku tane, ko Tungamala le malu fuimono papa li'i, toku papa, ko Te Whaunga Lupe Pangamali e Tungamala toku mama, ko papa li'i a la langafa Tungamala Maiava toku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Talo whalava, malo lava le soifua maua, malilangi e mā, o lo wingoa, o pāli'i a la langafa Maiava, o luk tamā o Tungamala pāli'i, o luk tina o Tawhaonga Tungamala, o Siok To'olua, o Pauli Samuelu Maiava, o te tupunga mai ai o Saanapu Salani Whalealili le whanga pāli'i Mapuipa. E tolu si ma whanau o Ariel Zion Marichi, sa o whanau I Aukilani New Zealand o loo matu nofo nei mau ai nei I Carlston, kere hana Aukilani Sifo. Ia, ua whaamanuia I nga lava lau nganga I le nei awanoa ta ua o mwhaianta tu tatala noa, e winga I na mta upu o le autism, ma le ngā luenga o loo whaia I le Pacific Autism Support Group, pia fo'i la uia ngā luenga o loo whaia nei I le St. Leonard's Road School, o le SENCo. So, talo falava, everyone. That was a very long greeting. My name is Alala Gafa Maiava, short name Gafa, known by many as Gafa. I'm new to this forum, and I'm very, very honored today to be called upon to come and share a little bit of my story. I just firstly want to acknowledge my Heavenly Father, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. I really believe that that the art of talanoa and sharing and being able to share some of our stories and the knowledge that we have in the professions and the spaces that we come into help us to grow knowledge and also to help others and awhi others. Just a little bit from today, I just want to acknowledge Jordan Lee and Janine on the amazing talanoa that they had this morning, doing some amazing things in those spaces. And as a mum who's an autism mum and listening to the amazing knowledge that you have and what you're sharing with others through the platforms that you are on and just the resources you're willing to put together just really encourages me, empowers others, and also helps us to share information about our children, about how we can better support our whānau who are neurodiverse or have ASD. So I'm just really honoured to be here. I was asked to be here by a representative from Passage, which is the Pacific Autism Support Group. So I just want to do a shout out to Betty and Brian Pulefulau, who are the founders of Passage, and their committee, Rachel and Donna, and also to Tautai Pacific. We've had a few talanoa, Brian, just regarding today, and it's a real honour to be here to share a little bit of my journey. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, so just a little bit about today's talanoa. And talanoa basically having a discussion or a talk about what we've been discussing today. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my malanga or my journey in life as a Pacific autism mama, my passage ainga, who is my Passage Family Pacific Autism Support Group, and number 3 is a SENCo or a Special Needs Coordinator. And I've actually shared this piece of artwork. It's by Fatu Whiu, who's a very famous Samoan artist, my favourite Samoan artist. And I wanted to share a little bit about it because I know that quite commonly we see the jigsaw representing autism. And I thought, I'm a Pacific mum, and this piece of work speaks to me because there's dark patches which I think represent the challenges of sometimes what we go through as families or as a mum with a child who's got special needs. There's the light patches that show that there's lots of light in our journey, and also overlaid with that are these beautiful colours. And I like to think that that represents the colour that our children bring to our lives, different things that we deal with as families, and a little bit more about how I've arrived here today. So part 1, and talking about life as an ASD mama, I have 3 beautiful children. This is an old photo, but I think when I was looking for a photo to represent part of who I was as a mum, I came upon this one, and it really spoke to me about how untidy, how messy, how close and connected. There's so many emotions in this photo. Me holding a phone, of course, for my others to be looking on. Holding a baby, got another one tucked in beside me. I just thought it really said a lot about who I was at that point in my journey. And yeah, just I'm sure a lot of families or those with children who have no neurodiversity can probably relate to this photo. So I can't talk about autism in my family without giving you a little insight into who they are. So my ainga, or my family, my husband and I are first and second generation New Zealand born, Samoans. We have 3 beautiful children. We've got a girl, boy and a girl. So our family or our parents have migrated to New Zealand from Samoa. We are from Samoan origin, and growing up in West Auckland, my husband's a Westie, we're now Westies, but I was originally from Central Auckland and spent a good part of my life and career living in Central Auckland and working in schools in that area. My family are bilingual. We speak Samoan and English. This is really an important part of who we are, growing a family in a country that's not our homeland, and also with a child who's got autism. It was a big thing for us to continue our traditions and also to teach our children to speak and understand who they are and be strong in their identity as Samoans. Born in another country. I love who I am as a Kiwi. I love being a New Zealander and identify strongly with my Kiwi roots, but also wanting my family to have a really strong understanding of who they are as Samoans. We're blessed to have 2 sets of grandparents, one set who live in Samoa and one set who live in New Zealand. So we're very, very lucky to have had that input. And for families who have children on the spectrum or just children in general, it is amazing to have Nana and Papa, who we call ours, as a part of their world, as a part of their mix. We have 5 siblings between my husband and I, and only one living in New Zealand. So it gives you a bit of a picture that we, as much as we would love to have other siblings here, we have not many family members who are around us. We have lots of cousins. So family unit's really, really important in Samoan culture. And we have been so blessed to have family who understand and who are supportive of myself and my husband and our children, and especially my son. And so I just want to talk a little bit more about how we came on this journey, where it all began. And I put here, this is the story all about how my life got turned right upside down. So those of you who know Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you will know that is his key phrase when he first starts his rap at the beginning of the show. And I say my life got turned right upside down in an awesome way, and in many different ways when we had two under two. So I've said we had two children under 2 years old. And this is a picture of Ariel, who's our oldest, and Zion, who's a little under 2 years younger than his sister. Life was super busy. We had all the time in the world to invest in sort of put into our oldest daughter when she was born. So she was a very chatty, very social little girl, and she seemed to be hitting all her milestones. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, according to the Plunkett book, she's met every milestone. And probably most kids, or I don't know if they still have a Plunkett book now, but Plunkett books was kind of like my gold standard as a mum. I'm like, yes, she's reached her 9-month milestone. And that was, I think, how I measured how well I was doing as a mum. Son came along and he did things really, really differently. And even from a very young age, in this photo, he's a newborn, but just a little bit further on from there, maybe at 6 months, he was very different to her. For him, nighttime was daytime. He was up and about. He was not sleeping. He could run before he could crawl. So he was doing all these things sort of quite differently to my daughter. He could jump and climb, but he couldn't really hold a spoon. He wasn't fond of food, but he ate everything that was kind of on the floor. I don't think that's uncommon for babies in general, but he just wasn't a fan of food, or certain types of food. He seemed to focus in on certain things like a balloon, but was constantly moving around and unable to focus on other things. So he would fixate on certain things. He would sleep only for an hour at a time, but he'd be awake for hours. So he did have things quite different. And growing two little people under 2 years old, it was quite a challenge just trying to navigate some of these things that were quite different. And also people saying to us, that's boys for you. I don't know if that's true. I don't have another boy to compare it to, but they would often say things like that. Oh, they run, they don't. And like I say, we just managed what we did. From day to day, I worked part-time, but it was definitely a challenge for us at that time. I've got here, sort of moving quite quickly along, before the age of 2, he was showing signs of not being able to hear my husband and I when we called him, or he was off doing his own thing and he didn't seem to make much eye contact. And at the time, I'd been in teaching for about 10 years in a primary environment, primary school. And my understanding and my connection with kids with any kind of diagnosis was quite limited. Back then, and it feels like it was the early 2000s, I didn't have much experience of working with children with neurodiversity. And if I did have any experience with them, it would be watching a movie or seeing someone else in another classroom manage them, and it was quite rare. So one of the things that was quite obvious to us with him not speaking was he didn't make pleas for attention. He didn't really engage in that way. It was always we were following his lead. So when we did get him checked and he had his hearing checked, I made the suggestion to my husband. I said, look, if we do get his hearing checked, because, obviously that might help his speech. When we got his hearing checked, we thought if that fixes his speech, we should be okay. And I have these questions. I've written this in the presentation. If it's not his hearing, what could it be? And grommets was what they suggested when they found that he had glue ear. Maybe grommets would help him to speak and rule out any unknowns. But deep down inside, I think I knew that there had to be definitely more to what was going on with our boy. His name is Zion, by the way. And without really knowing what I was asking for, what I was asking my GP for, I requested a referral for my son to see a developmental pediatrician because his grommets had not seemed to improve any kind of speech for him. He was still pretty much doing the same things. And for all of us who are working in special needs and RTLBs or even teachers, you'll know that now the wait list times to see any pediatrician or any professional can be quite long. I know they can be up to a year. For us, and this was 13 years ago or 12 years ago, a few weeks after I made that request, we did go and see a pediatrician, and leaving the pediatrician's office at Starship, which was a nightmarish appointment because he just wasn't managing all the noise and all of this. We left and we were told that our son had the dreaded A word. And I say that dreaded A word because in my mind at that time, that was what I was thinking as a mum. I'm like, if he got autism, I wouldn't know what to do. Because all of my understanding of autism was incredibly limited, and it was nothing healthy. It was very quite negative, and the stereotypes that people had put out to me, or teachers that I'd worked with, and stories that I'd heard didn't really indicate a spectrum. It showed quite an extreme end of what autism looked like. So truly, as a mum, I dreaded it, and I walk away thinking about that day. I had taken, and for you as teachers, you'll know this, if you've got an appointment, you take half a day to take that appointment. If it's something you think is going to be okay, you walk away. I remember so clearly that day, having had half a day off in the morning to go and take my son, and my husband was the same, so we met and took him along. And I think with that going and thinking, oh, it's going to be okay when we came out, and it was like the rug had been pulled out from under me. That is my description of it, and I felt like I'd been handed a sentence. And funnily enough, the day that he got diagnosed was the 2nd of April. We did not know this at the time, but it was World Autism Day, and it was a really tricky time for us just to navigate. What does it mean? And in that moment, you often sort of sit and think, did I do something? Try and look for a reason to sort of pin why my son has autism. It's not in my family. It's not prevalent anywhere else. But I look and I think back to those days, and I think sometimes when you don't have a plan or you can't see what's ahead, you can't remember the pain of. So all you can think about is the pain that you're sitting in. And I remember going to school that day because I remember it was a half day and it wasn't going to be anything stressful, but it was. And I got back and one of the teachers said to me, because my son was 2 at the time, and this picture of him is him sitting in sand. I didn't know that was a sensory thing at the time. I just thought, this kid loves sand, he loves water. She said to me, your son at 2 years old is not going to be your son at 10 years old. And your son at 10 years old won't be your son at 20 years old. And in that moment, I couldn't see past him being 2. But I held on to hope in those words because it actually gave me a bit of hope to hang on to know that, hey, he will change. The pediatrician just handed me a whole bunch of notes and I'm going to have to go through them, and go through them I did. And like what Janine mentioned, having all this information and not really knowing where to start was probably that first year that we were just working our way through what does it mean for us to have a child with autism. And not long after he was diagnosed, we had our 3rd child. And I'm going to switch slides here. We had our 3rd baby, and we've got our girl, boy, girl. I've got what's normal, because all of a sudden what I thought normal was having 1 child and then going on to 2, and things were a little bit different, and then throwing our third baby in the mix. I took this quote from the Twisties ads. If you guys remember this, I think it's an Australian ad. Life's pretty straight without twisties. And so if I think about my life and how much and how different it looked, or my friends or the people around me had their kids perfectly routined, and it seemed like, even though it was probably not true, like everybody who had children my age seemed to have it all together. They seemed to manage, and I just couldn't seem to do like one thing in a routine, and it really bothered me. Said there here that our family of 4 became 5 after my son was diagnosed. We welcomed our baby girl while navigating what our new normal would be. And is there really a normal when you've got children with neurodiversity? The normal looks different. We started to learn about sensory needs. So we started to understand why he loved water so much, why he loved getting muddy, why he loved throwing sand, and all those things. And the more we understood, the more we started to try and accommodate, as Janine said, ways that we could support him in that way. He loved climbing trees, he scaled fences, he loved water, and wherever it was, he jumped into it. When I had my third baby and we had her at birth care, my son was, he was 4, and he walked out into the birth care car park and ran straight into the fountain and jumped in. And it was just very typical of him at the time. But, after having a third baby and looking at this child running into like a fountain of water, just can't explain to you what that feels like. But it was also really funny for us. So things that really I think would worry other families. I think we became very used to that edge of risk with Zion. One of the things that was quite difficult was struggling to go out to do what we thought were normal things that families could go and do, like food shopping or going to the playground or visiting family. All of those things were quite challenging because we couldn't understand why he didn't enjoy those activities, or he would become quite stressed, and it felt like a lot of the time we were running, protecting and safeguarding our boy from steers, from hurting himself, also people not understanding. And I think in that moment, in that time of growing him and trying to understand all his different quirks, you feel like you have to become an expert in your child and explain what's happening with him to every person that sort of is not aware of his condition or his situation. So I had to really think, and the thing that was a real support for my husband and I was having a kindy and having support staff that were working with Zion as he was going through the kindy years, that helped us to see that there were some things that he was really, really good at. He had an amazing sense of problem solving. He knew how to scale, to get something on the top shelf of the far cupboard. He didn't need any help with that. He could figure out a way to do it without falling over or hurting himself. He's an affectionate and empathetic child. He loves hugs, he loves kisses, he loves to be squeezed. And I think one of the things that Janine mentioned about children on the spectrum, or people saying that they have no feelings, that's something else someone had mentioned to me or many times in my journey as an ASD mum. And I think about it and I think, you really don't know until you have a child with ASD what that can be like. And for our son, absolutely loves affection, and we really try to foster that in him with his sisters from a very young age. And one of our Samoan values is whenga, and just keeping the brother and sister relationships really respectful. And even though he couldn't communicate with us or wasn't communicating at the time, that was something that we really tried to instill. And I know the theme for the Fono this year is te lewa, and just trying to teach our son that even while he wasn't able to speak to us, we did it through actions, and we would take his hand and get him to gently touch the girls. He would nod or give them a hug if things went okay, and that's what we were trying to foster through our own values as Samoans, and also trying to teach our son to be gentle. So he was lots of fun. He was really creative, always happy at home in his safe places, and our children all have safe places. He loved being outside, loved exploring. If we were looking for him, he was outdoors. and coupled with the strengths were also his challenges. And many of them I know are ones that many of our children experience. So sensory overload, when places are too noisy or too hot or too crowded. He had a selective diet, so there were lots of foods that he had as an aversion he wouldn't eat, wouldn't touch. Sleep patterns were very back to front. He was limited in his communication and very, very small vocab at the time, but he started to learn more words and learn communication through visuals and through supports of the people around us. He was a big runner, like Jordan mentioned about his son. And it was always concerning. So my husband and I got really fit. We got really fit in that season where we had to keep running after him because he could abscond like you wouldn't believe, and in places that were not safe and unfamiliar to him. He found change really difficult, and that's not something that's uncommon, I know, with our children with ASD or with other neurodiverse conditions, and anything unfamiliar. So it did feel like a lot of the time we were balancing going out and trying to navigate or manage sensory overload for our son. He's up in a tree as we take this photo. It's a couple of meters up off the ground, so he didn't worry about those kind of things. I think it was more something I worried about as a mum. I just want to talk a little bit about things that we found that really helped us. I've got quite a list here, and along with just having support systems with family. Our family were amazing. Just wanted to lock in on a couple that were really helpful for us. So I wanted to talk about how we kept things simple. We kept things simple by not putting too much pressure or expectation on ourselves to try and do all the things that we wanted to do, that we thought we needed to do. And so if we needed to access support, we would try and find help with, for example, he had an occupational therapist to support him by doing specialist swimming lessons with him so that he was a little bit safer around water. It didn't stop him wanting to go in the water, but it helped him to be a little bit safer if he was in a situation where he was near water. Asking lots of questions and anything that seemed to come up from our research or seeing other families or just identifying things that school had mentioned to us or Kindy had mentioned to us that he was good at, we would try and just ask questions around those things and see, is that something we could do at home? Is it something that we could help foster so that he learns and understands safety and boundaries and other things that would keep him occupied and safe and engaging more with people. We were connecting with other people, so other families that had similar children with similar needs. I think one of the things as a parent, as an ASD mum, I felt for quite a lot of that journey is when my son was young and newly diagnosed, was how lonely it felt. It felt so lonely being unsure what was okay when you go out in public and you've got a child who doesn't know how to wait, who doesn't know what social norms are, saying please or thank you in a certain situation. So connecting with others who had similar experiences did make us feel a little bit less worried about, or less worried that we were the only ones. So we had lots of support from OT, EIT, pediatricians, speech language therapists and physios, and I talk about them, and they weren't all at once. They didn't all arrive at once. The support certainly came through asking our GP, and when I was thinking about how we accessed all of this support, a lot of it did come from the pediatrician. And every concern I had, this poor GP would see me lugging my 3 children to the surgery or to the clinic, and I'd be asking him questions. I'd be asking him, can you help me figure out where I get help with this? So we tapped into as much support as we could that was right around us. And for want of a better word, we didn't really access other outside groups such as ASD dads and mums at the time. I know Passage was running for quite a long time before we actually joined Passage, but we certainly tried to get as much support as we could from the professionals that were around us. Some of the things we struggled with, and I think this would be most families with a lot of children, or children certainly on the spectrum, or with ASD, sharing our focus and attention and trying to make everything fair, when actually you know that you have to spend extra time and attention with your child who's got those extra needs. That was always tricky with our girls, and because it was so hard to take them out, we would have to take turns at taking our other two children somewhere if he wasn't managing. Feeling misunderstood and judged by other parents or adults when we would go out, or if we tried to sort of just manage a meltdown in public. It was so hard when it looked like, or it felt, some people would sometimes just say, oh, you need to look after your child, you need to discipline them. And I'm sure I'm not the only parent or the only family that's experienced that, but it was certainly a challenge that we struggled with, and made us not want to go out and do some of those things. It just made you not feel brave enough to do any of that. Having to explain or apologize for behavior, that was really sensory overload, and that's self-explanatory. Having a child that's not managing, that's not coping, like what Janine was saying, your understanding of your child, sometimes even with all the resources and all the things that you know about that child, enough is enough for them, and they're going to have that meltdown. But there are strategies we learned along the way that helped us to really sort of calm, and a lot of it came from, I need to be calm as a parent, like you were saying, just managing your own well-being and self-care. So those were just a few things that we found were really helpful, and things that we did struggle with in that time frame when my son was young. And I'm going to talk, he's grown a lot in these photos that you see now, since his tree climbing days. And I talk about change in the wind. And like I said, one of the hardest things that we faced as a family was not being able to do things together. Well, that was the perception that we had. And as much as we try to think of every scenario, things that could go wrong, we had like a plan A, B, C, and this was for family events, it was for going out events, it was going to the, some events were just out of the question. Going to the movies was too hard, going to, big family gatherings or big outings too hard. So we just learned to compartmentalize what we thought was manageable and tried to work on that. Around the time that Zion turned 10, we made a decision, and we decided to be brave and go, oh, you know what, we're just going to take him out and see how it goes. We were so nervous, and we were like, oh, well, if we take 2 cars. So this is the kind of planning and execution it would take for us to try and make sure that things were, if things went upside down, or it didn't work out, we always had a backup plan for the backup plan. We felt the fear, and we did it anyway. And some of these photos show him all dressed to go to Blues games. He went to the Football World Cup. He did the Weet-Bix triathlon with his school. He's been on a train. He's done so many things when we decided to be brave. And I say that knowing that lots of families try to be brave, or they are brave, and they take their kids out there. And I just take my hat off to all of you who have experienced life with your children, and you want to open opportunities for them. You want to do those cool things with them, but it just takes so many little steps sometimes, and sometimes it takes a big step of faith. So I've said here that from that point on, he's just gone everywhere with us, and he enjoys coming out. So I'm so proud of him at 13. He's now very happy to go out. He's very chatty. He loves to dress up and go out with his sisters. He's got certain things he likes to do. We still have the noise cancelling headphones when we go out, but we do what we can to manage him, manage those needs for him. And he absolutely loves being outdoors and coming out with our family now, which is so much of a blessing to us, because we want him to be part of all of this. And like I say, it really just took a step of us being quite having that courage to give it a go and see how he goes. And I just wanted to wrap up this part by saying the gift of being Zion's mum. It is such a gift to be his mum, because there's so many things that I've learned in this season, and in that journey, the journey that never ends, of being a mum, being a parent. Being his mum has taught me some of these lessons, so many lessons, but these are some of them. Enjoy every season and stage, is each moment is a gift. So learning, having fun. This is him in this photo looking like Poe. Poe is one of his favorite characters, Poe the panda, and he was totally being Poe. My son values my time and my focus more than anything. So of all the interventions, of all the support and things that I could offer him, he really wants my time and my focus more than any of those things. Behavior is usually a reflection of how he's feeling inside. If he's unwell, or he's not feeling so good, or he's nervous and scared, that behavior is communication to me that he's not okay. I don't have all the answers. And sometimes people, or sometimes I think I should know the answers. But the truth is, being okay with not knowing everything, not having a backup plan for everything, learning to see how he can manage his world without me having to intervene all the time, is something that I've had to learn over this process of growing him as a child, and also just this journey of watching him and learning more about him as a child who has autism. And less is often more. So I put down less talking, less stress, less demands, calm and regulated self. That goes for the child with autism, but also for the mum who's got a child with autism. And I know that that can be really difficult, easy to say and not easy to do. Less talking, less stress. But I have found that lots of strategies we use with him, breathing, slowing things right down, not expecting, not overloading him with demands. The cognitive overload and sensory overload is so much better for him. And so he's taught me that gift of patience, to have to take time to step back, not to rush, because so easy for us to want our children to follow and do everything in the same pace and at the same in the same way. And that's been my learning journey as a mum. I'm still learning. I'll continue to learn. As a family, we will continue to learn. But he's in such a beautiful place and so well supported now. In high school, he's in a satellite class. He's been in a special needs school since he was 5. And I can't talk highly enough about the work that Oakland Special School has been doing with my son here in Auckland. They are amazing. They have amazing therapists and staff that care and just know so much about Zion. And I'll talk a little bit more about the transitions and things that we do as a SENCo a little bit further on. Okay, so that was a little bit about my family and how far we've come now. I'll talk a little bit now about my Passage family, or my Passage Ainga, Pacific Autism Support Group, and them walking alongside us. My son is 13, and I think the group has been running for many, many years. We only very recently came on board with Passage, not because we didn't want to. I think when I think about the reasons we didn't partake or didn't take part in some events, even things that were sort of assigned for or set up for children with special needs, I think a lot of it was fear of my son's reaction, or fear of how people would view me as a mum if he went out and had a meltdown. And truth be told, that when the opportunity came up to go on a webinar where I was talking to Passage mums, because I'd been part of their Facebook group for some time, but just to join this Zoom, that didn't involve me having to have my son in a particular place. I just was talking to people online. So it was an awesome opportunity for me to get to know Passage, and this was sometime at the beginning of last year. They had a connect, a chance for parents to come onto the Facebook page and sign up so that we could have a talanoa. and it was a talanoa about anything to do with our children. And like I said, this was my first experience with Passage, and having the conversations with them around my experience as a mum, but also mum to Zion, but also as a SENCo, opened up doors, opened up questions, opened up an opportunity for me to share a little bit of my experience and how I support learners and children coming into the school space. So we were really, really glad to find that inroads into Passage. I just want to acknowledge Brian and Betty, who are the founders of Passage, and their reason for setting it up, for their son Roman. But if you see in this photo, this is not nearly all of the families that are part of Passage. I know they've been on your talanoa previously, but Passage is now set up in other parts of New Zealand. They have a group in Wellington, and I think they're setting up another group. But they have these wonderful get-togethers that that I was really worried about initially when I first went along. I still had my backup plan in the back, but little did I know that when I arrived, they had everything set up. I didn't have to worry about food. I didn't have to worry about what my son was going to play, or that my other two children were going to be bored, or they had something for everyone. And it was amazing just to arrive in a place and just not have to worry that he's going to run away, or that we would need to take some specialist equipment for him, or take a gear bag or something for him to keep him occupied. They had the coolest stuff. They had the coolest toys. There was so much to eat and lots of things for kids to do. And it was set up in it was one of their play dates. So Passage are an organisation that have lots of things happen throughout the year, but they have 4 set dates that are set up throughout the year. They are at every term they have a play date, a Passage play date. So that gives kids an opportunity, or families an opportunity, to come, to connect, to get to know each other. At one of these Passage play dates, I will have the opportunity to share a little bit of my journey as a SENCo and support families that needed extra support. So that was just my quick introduction to Passage, and since then we've had the blessing of being able to take our children along to take part in Passage events that they've had throughout the year. They offer a really safe space for all of our children that is gated, or has sensory equipment that's available to them. They operate out of a special needs school, which means that all of those things are readily available. And it's such a great opportunity for families who do have autism, that have questions, to come to where they can come together and sit down and talk about those things. So I've got a little bit of information here. One of the awesome things that came out of my visits to Passage was we met Dr. Rochelle Nafatali and Dr. Sandra Yellowhorse. So they are both academics and working professionals. And one of the things that they are currently working on in a research project they have proposed, and I know you've heard Dr. Rochelle on here before. Got a photo of you there, Brian, coming along to Passage.
Yeah, I see that.
So Dr. Rochelle, her work around gathering Indigenous perspectives on autism is amazing. Her and Dr. Sandra Yellowhorse, are both working on gathering this information and research so that there is stories and information available that talk about what our perceptions as families who are from Pacific cultures have about autism. We've had the discussion before that in Te Reo Māori they have the word takiwatanga, meaning in his own time and in his own space, and I love that, and I think it's such a beautiful concept. In our culture, in Samoan language, we don't seem to have a word specific to autism, and perhaps there should be one. But I think just even as first generation, like I say, Samoans growing up in a different country and still holding on to our cultural roots, what our understandings are of autism and how it's viewed in our community as Samoans. is quite different to, I suppose, other cultures, and we are a part of this research. And so Dr. Rochelle Nafatali is she did an interview with us, and they are working on producing a book that will tell those stories. So it's really amazing to be a part of that, and all of those opportunities have come through our time at Passage. So gathering stories from different families who have all different stories, and that's something I just want to do a big shout out to Passage. They are an amazing organisation that, like I say, I happened by default, happened upon. I didn't realise how much of a blessing or how much we needed that connection, and there are families there that we're now connected with, and it's beautiful. They're great. We get an opportunity to share a little bit about the work I do in schools to transition some of our children with autism, and I've had an opportunity to sort of share some knowledge around that, so that families have a little bit more information and are equipped to go into schools to advocate for their child. I think that's a big thing that I hope people will take away when we've had a conversation or they've heard a talanoa around that transition, and how important it is for families to be a big part, or whānau to be a big part of that transition, that schools get all the information they can to help them build a good plan of support around their children. I've said here that Pasifika Autism Support Group for me is a place of support and advice, non-judgmental space. They have playdates in a safe space if you're worried about your child maybe running away or not managing in that space. The spaces are where they do have playdates are purpose-built and have a lot of amazing equipment available to them. This little train set in here, at the bottom right-hand corner here is my son's favourite. So every time he arrives at a Passage playdate, that's the first thing he makes a beeline for. They also have events throughout the year, like a silent disco, connection, movies, so many things on offer that I think lots of families, like I say, even like ourselves, would struggle to want to do those things with their children just because of certain barriers or certain things that we're worried about. They've never made us feel like our child's needs are too much, and it's so awesome to be in a space where we're not having to apologize for behavior or anything like that. So I'm so grateful. Our family are grateful for Passage. Respite for families, coffee, yummy treats. They put on an amazing spread every time they have a get together, and lots of resources and opportunities. So at every play date, they will have a speaker or someone that will come along to share some information with the group about autism or about things that they therapy, lots of different topics. So just off the back of that, coming into my discussion around my role as SENCo, I work at St. Leonard's Road School. I am the SENCo LSC, so I came into this space last year, so this is my second year as a SENCo here, but prior to that, I was a learning support coordinator, which is a role that is currently, there's a lot more of them being put out in the next, according to our government's proposal to put out more LSCs. So they work alongside each other, or sometimes we have LSCs that are doing the roles of SENCos in schools as standalone roles. So I never expected to come into special needs. I have a background in teaching, and for more than 20 years I've spent a lot of it as a primary teacher in a primary classroom, or in different roles within a school, so as a CRT teacher or a release teacher. Coming into this role as an LSC and SENCo, really the driving force for me to come into this role was to support families support the school with things that I as a mum had experienced. Now, we have the privilege of my son being in a very specialised environment. He's Oars funded, and he's had a beautiful experience and journey coming through a special school. And I know that in our mainstream schools, it can be quite different and quite difficult for our families to access the support that that their children need, very much as Jordan and Janine touched on. And because of that, I feel like this role is really a calling. And in lots of ways, I'm still very much a learner, but I see it as an opportunity to bridge a space or bridge the gap between our families and the school system so that we can start to understand and do things better. And having a lens as a parent who's an ASD parent just helps me to understand some of those families and what they're going through. Not because I know every situation, and as Janine mentioned, no autistic child or no neurodiverse child is the same as any other. And I think that's what I want to talk about today, a little bit about how I do my role, or how I perform my role, helps me to help families, or helps me to help my school and staff and teachers and kaiako and kaiawhina to understand more about this child and what they need. And everything that Janine shared today has given a platform for what would be best practice in our schools if we had those resources available, as much as we could possibly provide for families. We know that that's not the case, but hopefully a little bit of what I share today will give you some insights into what I do as a SENCo and LSC here at my school. So I've talked about the role of SENCo in supporting children with ASD or neurodiverse conditions at school. Everything seems to have merged together, so I'm finding it hard to read, sorry. So basically my role as a SENCo or special needs coordinator is managing referrals to agencies, funding and support for our students, neurodiversity, learning support, well-being and behavioural concerns. I support teachers and students with diverse needs. Meaning supports teachers with students with diverse needs. I liaise with outside agencies to support students and teachers. I work with families and professionals to help transition our children to school. EITs, who are our early intervention teachers. I gather data and build a profile for a child entering school. I coordinate support and services for children with diverse needs, so that could be outside of RTLB, could be with MOE. I manage support staff, so I have quite a large team of kaiawhina or teacher aides at my school, and I coordinate where that support is allocated. Create IEPs or action plans for students, and I work together with Fono and kaiako. So that's kind of in a nutshell what my role is. Many of you who are RTLB work closely with SENCo and LSC in schools. And while that's on paper, that's what my role is, I think this is what's important to me as a SENCo. So I've listed here that what's most important to me as a SENCo is talanoa, the discussions that happen around our whānau, around our tamariki, and the ones coming in. So understanding, I think, has grown from the talanoa that we have around our children. If I can give a quick example of when we have children coming into our school, whether they come in at the new entrance level or they come in and they are a little bit older, for us to understand the needs of that child when their whānau or their parent brings them into school, we make sure that we have a discussion around that child and make sure we understand what's going on for them, whether it's strengths, what are their strengths, what are their challenges, and very much like what Janine is talking about. And I feel that this role, and with our senior leadership, they have interviews with all whānau that come through our school. I think that's a really important tool. I know that's something that RTLB do in their practice, and following he pikoroa and understanding what's important to that child, or what's important to their family, or lots about who they are, their identity. I think that's so important to me as a SENCo, to make sure that when we try to put interventions in place or support, we are keeping at the forefront of our minds what's important for that whānau, and who that child is. Building relationships with whānau, so that goes alongside what I've just mentioned, understanding what's on top for them, and that does come with having hui with them, and taking time to listen to what they have to share with us. Very much knowing our learners and staff, building relationships with our children so that we can understand a lot of what Janine was talking about, and we're trying to do this at these different levels. So for me as SENCo, spending time in the playground with the kids, or taking time to give mum a call if it's not been a good day for one of our children, or just trying to understand why they do something a certain way. So it is a lot of building a profile, like what Janine said around learner profile. Sorry, I keep referring to you, Janine, because you gave such an amazing talk, and talking about understanding what their triggers are, what makes them behave in a certain way, or what may be upsetting for them or difficult for them. It could be like the tag of their shirt, like you mentioned with your son, or sitting on a stool that's too hard, or having to sit on the floor or sit for too long. I've got here equipping staff with tools. So I think it's one thing to have a plan in place, but to not have anything for teachers, such as resources to help support them to do their mahi. I think that's something that is a big part of my role, and making sure that they have the equipment, or they have the resource, or they have the staffing available to do their mahi is really important to me. Considering supports or alternatives is a big part of what I think is important, and looking at different ways that we can support a child. So not just interventions with not just a plan, but sometimes they might need like play-based type learning, or sensory corner, or something that allows them to regulate in the classroom, or have an adult or special needs, kaiawhina working alongside them. I know that's not available in every school. I know every context is different, but this is for myself and the way I like to work within my context. This is very much really important to figure out what supports teachers need, as well as families, so that they can do the job they need to do. Transitional support is a big one for us. So transitioning, we do a lot of work around transition for EITs, bringing children into our space. We certainly have a lot of hui to connect with them, to make sure that we understand who they are when they come in. Like I mentioned earlier on with the talanoa, we transition our students from year to year within schools. We consider really carefully where we place our children, because so many things can be tricky for our kids, and the tone, as you say, the tone of voice for some of our children, for some of our teachers who might have a loud voice or a soft voice, or has a lot of experience, or is really good outdoors, and or has an ideal setup in their classroom for a child who has those needs. Things to think about when we do transition work with students within our school, but also considering our kids going out to intermediate. We're a primary school, so when our children leave, we want to make sure they are equipped with tools for success, so that when they go to their next school, we've had lots of talanoa with the next school, the SENCo or the SLT team from another school, so that they understand the needs that our learners have. And I think that transition is one of the most important parts of my role as a SENCo. So talking about supporting families with neurodiverse children, This is a little bit of information for families or for our RTLB that work alongside our SENCos and LSCs. If children are 5, and this is something that families sometimes don't know, starting primary school, families may visit with their child. They can connect with the SENCo in a school to discuss their child's enrolment. So I wrote this with families in mind, but also with the RTLBs and other professionals in mind, teachers. If families do come, I think it is important for them to have those opportunities given to them to do visits at school, not pre-transition visits. So an opportunity for them to come in and talanoa with the SENCo or the DP or whoever it happens to be that manages enrolments. So important for our families to get a gauge of the school and what's available to them, and talking about early intervention teachers. They don't work with all of our children. Sometimes if there's a child that's been earmarked an ECE and has had an early intervention teacher attached to them, they should be assigned to a child who's gotten a diagnosis of autism for their transition to school. So I do meet with EITs, and what's really important is that when I sit down with EITs, we do talk about, we do a big profile on the child and work out what the child is coming in with, whether they have sensory needs or learning challenges. Some of our kids come in and they're still in nappies. So a raft of different sort of needs that they come in with, and it's really important for us to understand that, and we have them on file. We build a file around that child before they arrive. And often, if the families are okay to do this, they will come in and have that talanoa with us well before their child does any transitions. So I think that pre-enrollment time is really important for whānau, if we're aware that they're coming. And I think it's something that would be really rich if the RTLBs, if there is a handover to RTLB, that the RTLB is a part of that. I very much work closely with my cluster, and they are usually a part of our early intervention talanoa. So we've got children of different types of funding or different needs that come in. We've got our students with AWS funding, so my job is to coordinate how that child will access support, what it looks like for their support in the classroom, teacher aid support, and how long their transition will be. So we've had a number of students who have AWS funding, and the way we structure their transitions is quite different depending on the needs of the child. And quite often I believe in slow and steady, and making sure that we're giving a lot of space and time for our children to adapt to changes, especially if they have ASD. So this involves a lot of connection and communicating with families, and the availabilities for families to be a part of that transition as well. Quite often it's good for mum or a caregiver to come along and be a part of what's going on in the classroom so they can see where their child will be. And then slowly integrating them, or building resilience around routines and things that we're growing for them, and providing lots of support. And then the handover from EITs who come in with our AWS funded children or children without funding often go to RTLB. I think that will possibly change next year with the introduction of more EIT support. I won't talk to that because it's something I'm not overly sure about. Students without funding, if there are outside agencies that are needing to be part of that transition, such as OT, then we include them in our conversations as well. So I just said again that my job is to build relationships with whānau and just get a gauge on where their children are at and what needs they have. So I've said this to families in previous talanoa that I've had about bringing their children to school when they're first enrolling children at school, and if they are children with a diagnosis of ASD or neurodiversity, these are things that I've said are very useful for their connection with SENCo. This list itself gives me, makes me accountable, because I have to make sure I follow my own advice. So I've said, do take a support person when you are meeting with staff at school to enrol your child. So that could be an EIT, a support worker, a social worker, an autism advocate, or a trusted person. Often when you take someone with you, it helps to have two set ears, or someone writing details, taking information that you might want to talk about later. Do take medical documentation. I found this to be really helpful. Often when families come in and they don't bring some of the information that would help us to know a little bit more about their child, we find those things out sort of a little bit further down the track. Sometimes pediatrician notes, daycare portfolios, any hospital letters I think is relevant to help us understand better what the child's needs are, is really helpful for us, or for me as a SENCo, and it's something I request if they come in. And it's really good for families to come in knowing that they've got this information and that they can share with the school. I've said, do your homework, find out who the people are in the school before having a meeting, pre-organising a meeting with SENCo or DP. And I'm saying this as an autism mum to other autism mums or to professionals, that this is something, a checklist that I would sort of say to them. Make sure you know who you're working with, and perhaps do a look on the school website. It's really helpful if you know who's where and what their role is, and that also helps you to make a decision around who the person is that you need to meet with before bringing your child to school. Do take a list of questions I've said that you'd like to ask about the school, asking about supports, ratios and expectations. I think what Janine mentioned about just the school needing to understand, or the teachers needing to understand what it is that the child helps support your child, or the child with autism who's coming into the school. All those things are really important to mention when they arrive. I know as a SENCo it's really difficult when we sit down with families, and we have to say to them sometimes that there is no availability for a teacher aide to work one-to-one with their child. And I like to think in my job, as much as possible, I try to provide support that I know will help that child to have the best opportunity of transitioning in smoothly. So even if it means concentrating what teacher aid support we have around those children, just to set them up in that first instance when they first arrive at school. Those are all considerations that we make around how much time we would allocate. I know that's not a luxury for all schools or all spaces, but just here in my context, that's when I consider a child coming in with certain needs, I think that's definitely something. If they're not always funded, and we know so many of our children who don't qualify for OARS still have lots of those sensory challenges, lots of those learning challenges, and my goal is to really equip as much as possible that child to manage some of those initial routines when they come to school, whether it's through use of visuals or timetables, to help them grow some confidence, if in their own ability to manage their day-to-day things, and having a visual schedule for many of our kids is so important, and helps them to know what makes their day predictable. I've said, do request a tour of the school. Is it gated? Where are the toilets? Who would change nappies if your child's in nappies? What are some hazards that could be a safety risk? Is there a gate? Is it locked? What are the policies on restraint, runners, or strategies if something goes wrong? Do they have a prospectus that you can take away with you? So that was quite loaded, requesting a tour for the school, and many times and here at our school that we do a lot of requests like that. And I think in general, when people come to enroll, we do, our deputy principals would take them for a tour of the school. This is really helpful. I find it, or myself if they come in to see me, this is really helpful because it gives parents a gauge of what their child is coming into. Quite often if they've come from ECE or kindy, they're not aware of just how much bigger a school can be if it's their first child, or their child is used to being in quite a gated, safe environment. Not to say that schools are not safe, but we've got different amounts of sort of safety barriers in place at different places. So we are a gated school, but we have an adjoining here in my school, but we have an adjoining field with our intermediate school. So there are risks that are associated with our children who are runners, and just making sure that we have support around them, that families are aware of what our environment looks like, is really, really important. And there's lots of different things that we can put into place to try and support our children. And I like to think, like I said, that there is more than one approach to manage concerns or manage things, safety issues or things that may be a concern for families coming into school. And the Talanoa helps us to establish that. And my job is really to look for ways that we can make sure that we keep our children safe, and being honest with families about the spaces that we have. So I've got here, do check out other schools. It's really good for us to have ears open, eyes open as parents, to be aware of what's around us, what resources are around us. Smaller schools have different resources to much larger schools, different areas, different types of equipment outside. I think it's really important for our families with ASD children or neurodiverse children to do their homework and go and have a little look around, because not all school spaces are the same, and what's available is quite different from school to school. So the last thing that really conversations around with our children with ASD is laws around our school zones. So if your children are within a school zone, by law, and I've put this down as a hyperlink here, sorry, if you live in a school zone, your child is automatically qualified to enroll. And I think that is something that's really difficult for lots of families sometimes when they come in with children, that different messaging they get. So I was just sharing that information about availability for the possibility of them going to a local school, because I do know that that's been something that has been an issue for some families, trying to go to their local schools. And just as an advocate, saying that there is a law that says you can go to a school if you live within that zone. And if there's any further information around that they want, happy to answer any questions. But I just want to say thank you. That was my wrap up. Thank you. I've put down here quickly that RTLB obviously are a huge service that we work closely with as a SENCo, and they are very skilled. I want to shout out to Cluster 6, my liaison, Melanie Sorby. She is an amazing skilled professional that I ask all my questions to. So I highly recommend tapping into the RTLB resource that's available out there. MOE for other services that need extra support. They are a group that they are an organisation that I use if beyond RTLB I need a lot of extra support. I found that our RTLB cluster is amazing at providing lots of support, and our public health nurse as well. So thank you so much. Sorry, I know that was a long Eleanor, but hopefully there'll be a little bit of takeaway from there.
Thank you, Gafa. You've given us a lot of information. We probably won't have any time for questions, but I really enjoyed that slide that you had where you talk about enjoying every season, and then what your son Zion wants from you the most is your time and your focus. And then, yeah, I acknowledge that you say that you don't, well, nobody expects you to know everything. And then it's the same for us as teachers. We don't know everything, but yeah, thanks for your talanoa. You've given us lots to think about and strategies to use. What we'll do is we'll pass on to Padmani to say a thank you and a farewell.
Thank you. Gafa, we are very grateful for your inspiring presentation. your willingness to share your reflections on cultural values, who you are, and your ASD journey. Your positive approach on how your life turned upside down is so remarkable. Your role as a SENCo and the way you navigated your journey as ASD Mama has offered us valuable perspectives that will guide and inspire our mahi moving forward. Just to let you know, the gift of being Zion's mum was a very powerful statement.
Thank you.
We are truly grateful for the time, care, and passion you brought to this talanoa. Vinaka Vakalevu and Fa Fetai Televa. Thank you very much.
Thank you.